All right, so have you ever thought about this? Like when you buy a new car, right? Everything's perfect, it's shiny and new.
Yeah.
But then down the line, you get a crack in your windshield, or you need new tires, or maybe you just want to upgrade your sound system. Where does all that stuff come from?
Well, it's a great question,
Yeah.
and it doesn't just magically appear, and it's usually not coming directly from the car manufacturer.
Right.
Today, we are diving deep into a world that's actually pretty massive, but most people don't really think about it too much. It's the automotive aftermarket.
Yeah, the automotive aftermarket. And I think when most people hear that, they think about like, the local auto parts store.
Yeah,
But as we started digging into this, there is a lot more going on behind the scenes.
absolutely. When we talk about the automotive aftermarket, what we're really talking about is that whole system, that whole network that comes into play after a vehicle is sold.
Okay.
So think of it as this ongoing support system for literally every car, truck, and SUV out there,
So every vehicle on the road?
pretty much. And that includes all the parts that you might need to make repairs, whether it's a tiny little fuse or a whole new engine, tires, all the work that goes into fixing up a car after an accident, regular maintenance, and even those extras that people add to personalize their vehicles, like custom wheels or roof racks. It's a
Right,
lot.
it's really comprehensive. So where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, let's start with the scale of it all. In 2024, the automotive aftermarket represented almost 2% of the entire U.S. gross domestic product.
That is huge.
Yeah, it's massive. And when you think about how vital your car is to you, like getting to work or running errands or just living your daily life, this industry is the silent partner that keeps things moving.
Yeah, it really is. It's a cornerstone of the economy. We found that it supports something like 5 million jobs all across the United States.
Exactly. And those jobs aren't just mechanics. We're talking about the people who make the parts in factories, people in warehouses organizing and shipping those parts, the folks selling parts in stores, and the people in the businesses that do repairs and provide all sorts of car services.
Yeah, so many different skills and
Right.
professions.
It's a huge job creator.
So our goal today is to break this whole world down for you. We're going to pull back the curtain and really explore the automotive aftermarket. We've gathered information from industry groups, market research reports, and all kinds of sources to give you a full picture of this, well, essential part of the automotive world that so many people don't realize is there.
Absolutely.
All right, so where do we start with this massive industry?
Well, I think a good starting point is to look at the different types of products that make up this aftermarket.
Okay.
We can generally break these products down into three main categories.
Okay.
First, we have what's called original equipment manufacturer replacement parts. These are pretty much identical to the parts that were in your vehicle when it rolled off the assembly line.
So the exact same parts that were originally used?
Exactly. They're often made by the same companies that supplied the car manufacturer, and they're designed to fit and function just like the originals.
Okay, so it's like getting a factory fresh part, even if your car isn't new anymore.
Right. And then there are aftermarket parts. Now, this one might seem a little obvious from the name, but these are basically alternative options to those original equipment parts.
So these are for people who maybe want something a little different.
Right. Maybe they're looking for something that's a bit easier on the budget, or maybe they want to improve performance.
Oh, so like high performance brakes or a cool exhaust system.
Exactly. And this category also includes those parts that are specifically made for modifying a vehicle.
Like if you want to take your Jeep off-roading or make your car look really unique.
Exactly. Customization is a huge part of it.
Okay, so we've got the original parts and then the aftermarket alternatives. What's the third category?
The third category is accessories. These are the items that people add to their vehicles to improve comfort, convenience, safety, you name it.
So things like floor mats, seat covers, roof racks to carry stuff, maybe even a really nice sound system.
Yeah, all of that falls under accessories. And of course, there's a huge focus on customization in this category. It's all about making your car feel like your own.
I bet there are a ton of different options.
Oh, there are. We found that there could be as many as 12 to 15 million different individual part numbers out there.
Wow, how do you even keep track of all of that?
It's a huge logistical challenge, and there are a few reasons why there are so many different parts. Obviously, every time a car company comes out with a new model, it brings with it a whole new set of parts.
Right, so new models mean new parts.
Exactly. But there's also a big demand for parts for older cars, like even really old cars like the Ford Model T.
So people are still fixing up those classic cars.
Absolutely. There's a whole market dedicated to keeping those vintage cars on the road.
Wow, that's really cool. So who are all these people buying these millions of parts?
Well, broadly speaking, We can split the buyers into two main groups.
Right.
First, you've got the do-it-yourselfers, the DIYers.
Those are the people who like to work on their own cars.
Exactly. They enjoy doing their own maintenance, repairs, maybe even some modifications.
They're the real car enthusiasts.
Yeah, that's right. But, they only account for about 20% of the total parts purchases.
Oh, that's actually less than I thought.
Yeah, the other 80% falls into what we call the do-it-for-me segment.
So these are the people who take their cars to the professionals.
Exactly. Maybe they don't have the time, the tools, or the knowledge to do the work themselves.
Makes sense?
This group includes everyone from your local independent mechanic to the service departments at the dealerships and those big national chains of auto repair shops.
And are we only talking about regular cars here?
No, not at all. The aftermarket serves all sorts of vehicles. We often think about passenger cars, light trucks, and SUVs.
Right, your everyday vehicles.
Right, but it also serves medium-duty vehicles, like bigger commercial trucks and vans, and even heavy-duty vehicles, like semi-trucks and buses.
Wow, so everything from a small car to a huge 18-wheeler?
Exactly, and these different categories are often determined by what's called the gross vehicle weight rating. This basically tells you how much weight a vehicle can safely carry.
So a small car would have a low gross vehicle weight rating, and a big truck would have a much higher one.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have all these millions of parts, millions of buyers. Now, how do these parts actually get from the factory to the person who needs them?
Well, the distribution of parts in the automotive aftermarket is pretty complex.
Oh, I bet.
Traditionally, it was done through what we call two-step distribution.
Okay.
So a part manufacturer would sell a bunch of parts to a warehouse distributor.
Okay.
And then that distributor would sell those parts to retailers, sometimes called jobbers, who would then sell them to the consumer.
So 2 steps. Manufacturer to distributor to retailer.
That's the basic idea. Now, sometimes you have what's called 3-step distribution, which add another layer in between.
Okay, how does that work?
So the manufacturer still sells to a warehouse distributor.
Okay.
The distributor then sells to a jobber, who then sells to an installer, like a mechanic or repair shop, who then finally gets the part to the customer.
So there are a few different paths a part can take.
Right. Now, the internet has really shaken things up in the last few years.
Yeah, I bet. It's changed the way we buy almost everything.
Exactly. And now you see more and more manufacturers selling directly to consumers online.
Cutting out the middleman.
Yeah, it's called the direct-to-consumer approach. And sometimes they sell directly to installers, too, so that's direct-to-installer. Online retailers have become a big part of this new landscape.
It makes sense. It can be a lot more convenient to order online.
Right. Plus, online retailers often have a wider selection of parts.
So we have all these different companies involved in getting parts from point A to point B. Can you give us a sense of who some of the key players are?
Sure. At the very beginning, you have the manufacturers.
The companies making the parts.
Exactly. These include both the original equipment manufacturers, who makes the parts that are essentially the same as what came on the car originally.
Okay.
And then you have the aftermarket manufacturers, who produce those alternative or specialized parts. And within the manufacturing world, you'll often hear people talk about a tier system. Tier 1 suppliers sell directly to the vehicle manufacturers, Tier 2 suppliers sell to the Tier 1 companies, and so on. It's a bit of a hierarchy.
Interesting. So it's like a chain of suppliers.
It is. Then you have the distribution network.
Yeah.
The warehouse distributors play a really important role.
They're the ones moving huge volumes of parts.
Exactly. They buy big quantities of parts from lots of different manufacturers, and then they supply those parts to smaller businesses.
Got it.
So you have big national companies like Napa, or the distribution arms of companies like Advance Auto Parts and CarQuest.
Yeah, those are names I recognize.
They basically maintain these huge inventories and have complex systems to get those parts delivered quickly.
That makes sense.
Then you have those jobbers we talked about, the smaller, usually local stores that really focus on serving professional mechanics.
Okay.
And then the retailers like AutoZone and O'Reilly Auto Parts, they're the ones selling directly to consumers, both the DIRs and some professionals.
Got it. And of course, we can't forget about those online retailers like Rock Auto and Amazon Automotive.
Right. They've become huge players in selling directly to customers online.
And at the end of this whole chain, you have those installers and repair facilities, the ones actually putting the parts on the vehicles.
Right. From your local independent mechanic to the dealership service centers and the big national repair chains.
So it's a pretty intricate system with lots of moving parts. What are some of the unique challenges that make the aftermarket so, well, unique?
Well, one of the biggest is making sure that the right part ends up on the right vehicle.
Yeah, you can't just take any part and expect it to fit on any car.
Exactly. Unlike buying, say, a standard-sized battery, which might work for lots of different devices, a car part often only works for a specific year, make, and model of vehicle.
Right, my old car's parts definitely wouldn't work on a brand new truck.
Exactly. So you can imagine trying to keep track of all those different parts for all those different vehicles.
That's like a nightmare.
It's a huge challenge. Luckily, they came up with some data standards to try and make it all a bit more manageable, like the Aftermarket Catalog Exchange Standard.
The Aftermarket Catalog Exchange Standard, what is that?
It's basically a way to manage information about all those different parts. It handles the more than 60,000 different combinations of vehicle year, make, and model, plus other details like engine type and transmission.
Wow, 60,000 different combinations.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Without that kind of system, I bet finding the right part would be a nightmare.
It would be almost impossible.
Hmm.
And then there's the issue of the technical knowledge you need to work in this industry. Cars are so advanced these days.
Yeah, I can barely change a tire these days.
And mechanics need to be really skilled to diagnose and fix modern vehicles. There are so many electronics and computer systems now, it's incredibly complex.
So it's more than just knowing how to turn a wrench.
Absolutely. And there are groups like the Society of Automotive Engineers. They've developed tons of standards for vehicle components. And then you have the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence. They offer certifications for technicians to make sure they have the right skills and knowledge.
So it's like a whole other level of education.
It is. And then you can't forget about car culture. There are millions of car enthusiasts out there who love working on their own vehicles. They're really passionate about it.
Yeah, there are car shows, car clubs, online forums. It's a big community.
It is. People love customizing their vehicles, whether it's for off-roading or performance or just to make their car unique.
So it's a combination of practicality and passion.
Exactly. And all of this makes the automotive aftermarket a huge part of the economy.
Oh.
It's not just about fixing broken cars.
It's a driving force in the economy.
It is. We mentioned before that it generated over $400 billion in the U.S. in 2023. That's huge.
Yeah, and it supports millions of jobs.
Exactly. There are these massive trade shows like the Specialty Equipment Market Association show and the Automotive Aftermarket Products Expo. They bring together thousands of companies and professionals from all over the aftermarket world.
So the aftermarket isn't just some small niche industry. It's a vital part of keeping the whole transportation system running and a big driver of economic activity.
Absolutely.
Now, what about the future? What are some of the big things on the horizon for the automotive aftermarket?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with all the changes in technology. New cars are becoming so advanced, with sophisticated electronics, diagnostics, and even the way engines and powertrains work is changing.
Yeah, technology is moving so fast these days.
It is, and the aftermarket has to adapt. They have to develop the parts, the tools, and the expertise to service these new vehicles.
Right, so they need to keep pace with all the changes.
Exactly, and in some cases, companies in the aftermarket are even helping to drive innovation in these areas.
Wow, that's impressive.
And then there are all the rules and regulations that the aftermarket has to follow.
Oh, I bet there are a lot of those.
There are. Everything from safety standards set by the government to those Environmental Protection Agency rules about emissions.
Right.
Any aftermarket part that replaces an original component has to meet the same standards as the original part.
Makes sense.
And then there's the fact that demand for certain parts can change throughout the year.
Oh, so like a seasonality to the aftermarket.
Exactly. For example, when it starts to get cold, you'll see a spike in sales of winter-related products like antifreeze and snow tires.
Okay, and then in the summer, people are probably buying more parts for those recreational vehicles and things like that.
Right. And even things like parts needed for collision repairs can see a seasonal change based on the weather.
That's fascinating. I hadn't even considered that.
And then there's the fact that bigger companies are often buying up smaller companies.
Oh, so there's consolidation happening in the aftermarket?
Absolutely. And that's happening across all segments, from manufacturers and distributors to retailers.
So the industry is kind of changing shape over time.
It is. And then you have the impact of globalization.
So are more parts being made overseas?
Exactly. You see more and more parts being manufactured in countries all over the world. And that's led to a rise in what's called private label brands, where a big distributor or retailer will put their own name on a part, even though it's made by a different company.
Interesting.
And then there's the whole right to repair movement, which is a really important issue for the aftermarket.
Can you explain what that is?
Basically, it's about making sure that independent mechanics and even just regular people have access to the information and the tools they need to repair their own vehicles.
Okay.
As cars become more complex, they rely more and more on computer systems, and sometimes the manufacturers try to restrict access to that information, forcing people to go back to the dealerships for repairs.
So the right to repair movement is trying to ensure that people have other options. And what about the rise of electric vehicles? How is the aftermarket preparing for that?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Electric vehicles are definitely going to change the aftermarket.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
They have fewer moving parts than traditional gasoline cars, so you won't need to replace things like oil filters or spark plugs as often.
Right. That makes sense.
But electric cars still need things like tires, brakes, suspension parts, sensors, and even cooling systems for the battery.
So it's not like the aftermarket is going to disappear completely.
No, not at all. It's more of an evolution.
So they'll need new expertise and new parts to keep up with the new technology.
Right, exactly.
This is all really fascinating stuff. It's clear that the automotive aftermarket is a lot more than just a place to get your car fixed.
Absolutely. It's a vital part of the automotive world and a huge driver of the economy. It's complex, it's constantly adapting, and it keeps millions of vehicles on the road.
And it's a testament to the ingenuity and hard work of so many people behind the scenes.
It really is.
So the next time you see a car driving down the street, think about all the parts and all the people that went into making that car run.
I think that's a great takeaway.
It really makes you appreciate all the things that go into our everyday lives.
It does.
And it makes you wonder what other hidden industries are out there working tirelessly to keep our modern world moving forward.
That's something to think about.
It is. All right, well, that's our deep dive into the automotive aftermarket. Thanks for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See you then.
Bye.